For 26 years, from a single one-off pilot in 1983 to its final episode in 2010, The Bill was one of British television's great constants. It began life as a gritty, almost documentary-style drama called Woodentop, built around the daily grind of uniformed police work at a fictional station in East London called Sun Hill. What started as an experiment in realism grew into something much bigger, a twice-weekly institution that, at its peak, pulled in well over 10 million viewers and ran for more than 2,500 episodes, making it one of the longest-running police dramas in British television history. Generations of actors passed through Sun Hill's corridors, some for a single guest appearance, others for decades, and for millions of viewers those actors became as familiar as neighbors. You didn't just watch The Bill. You lived alongside it, year after year, case after case, and the actors who filled its corridors became part of the emotional furniture of ordinary British life. That is precisely why certain losses hit as hard as they did. When an actor who has sat at the same desk, worn the same uniform, and delivered the same reassuring nod to camera for years suddenly isn't there anymore, it doesn't feel like losing a stranger. It feels like losing someone who was, in some odd and very real sense, part of the household. The show itself was built on that idea, the notion that ordinary, unglamorous police work, the paperwork, the waiting around, the small kindnesses and small failures, deserve just as much screen time as any dramatic car chase or armed siege. That philosophy meant the actors playing these roles had to feel utterly real, and the best of them disappeared so completely into their characters that audiences struggled to separate the two. Part of what made The Bill so unusual, especially by the standards of modern television, was how long its cast members tended to stay. In an industry where actors typically move between projects every year or two, several of the people at the heart of this show spent 10, 12, even 20 years playing the same character, week in and week out, through hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 episodes. That kind of longevity builds something rare between an actor and an audience. Viewers didn't just recognize these faces, they trusted them, expected them, planned their evenings around them. It also meant that when a Bill actor eventually left the show, whether by choice, by a scripted exit, or because production simply moved on, it often felt like the end of a much longer relationship than a typical television farewell usually represents. That sense of loss only deepened when, years or even decades later, news came that one of them had died. What follows is a look back at 7 of those actors, the men who helped build Sun Hill into something believable, and whose own lives, off-camera, ended far sooner than anyone watching at home could have expected. This isn't a story built on rumor, invented dialogue, or speculation about people who are no longer here to correct the record. It's an attempt to tell their stories honestly, using what is actually documented about each of them, with the respect their careers earned. Kevin Lloyd spent a decade as the audience's favorite kind of detective, rumpled, funny, and utterly believable. As DC Alfred Tosh Lines, he wasn't the officer who kicked down doors or delivered the big speeches. He was the one who made the station feel human, the colleague everyone recognized, because he reminded them of somebody they actually knew. Lloyd was born Kevin Reardon Lloyd in Derby in March 1949, into a family with genuine ties to policing. His own father had served as a police officer before dying in an accident while responding to an emergency call in 1970. Kevin initially trained to become a solicitor before changing course entirely and enrolling at East 15 Acting School in London. His pre-Bill career was already substantial by the time Sun Hill came calling. He had played the nightclub owner Don Watkins in Coronation Street and appeared in Minder, Boone, Z-Cars, Andy Capp, and Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, building a reputation as a dependable, versatile character actor. Lloyd joined The Bill in 1988 and played Tosh Lines for roughly a decade, becoming one of the show's most instantly recognizable faces. He was so beloved by viewers that in February 1992, he was the surprise subject of an episode of This Is Your Life, a rare honor reflecting just how attached the public had become to him. But away from the cameras, Lloyd was fighting a long and increasingly public battle with alcoholism. In an interview published to promote his autobiography, tellingly titled The Man Who Loved Too Much, he explained that the drinking had crept up on him gradually during years of commuting between London film sets and his family home in Derbyshire, working what he described as 7 days a week just to keep everything afloat. The strain eventually cost him his marriage. He and his wife, Leslie, separated in 1995 after 22 years together, and the couple's large family. He had 8 children in total, 1 adopted, was left to absorb the fallout of a struggle he was never quite able to put down for good. By early 1998, the drinking had begun affecting his work directly, with repeated instances of him arriving on set unfit to film or unable to remember his lines. On the 27th of April that year, producers made the difficult decision to let him go. Within days, Lloyd checked himself into a clinic in Burton-upon-Trent, Staffordshire, for supervised detoxification, and was placed on a course of medication designed to discourage drinking. But partway through treatment, he left the facility and drank anyway, then returned to the clinic still intoxicated. He went to bed that night and did not wake up. An inquest later found he had died of asphyxiation after vomiting in his sleep, a death made all the more dangerous by the combination of sedative medication and alcohol in his system. He died on the 2nd of May, 1998, just 5 days after his dismissal from a show that had made him a household name. He was 49 years old. The reaction from his Bill colleagues was immediate and heartfelt. Fellow cast member Billy Murray, who played DS Don Beach, told reporters at the time that everyone connected to the show was shocked and saddened, and admitted that the warning signs had been visible for over a year, which somehow made the loss feel both inevitable and unbearable at the same time. Because filming schedules meant Lloyd had already completed several episodes ahead of broadcast, Tosh lines continued appearing on screen for weeks after the actor's actual death, an eerie overlap that many viewers found deeply unsettling once the news became public. Lloyd's own son, James, would go on to join the Bills cast years later, playing a young police constable in the very same fictional station where his father had spent a decade of his career, a quiet continuation of a legacy built on real family history with the police. Kevin Lloyd is remembered less for how his story ended than for the 10 years of Monday and Thursday nights he gave to viewers who genuinely felt they knew him. Colin Tarrant brought something different to Sun Hill when he arrived as Inspector Andrew Monroe in January 1990, a steadiness that made him feel like the station's moral compass. Monroe wasn't flashy. He was fair, careful, and quietly authoritative, exactly the kind of superior officer viewers wanted to believe was really out there running things behind the scenes. Tarrant was born in Shirebrook, Derbyshire, in June 1952. He studied English and drama at the University of Exeter and trained further as a teacher, working briefly in education before the pull of the stage proved impossible to resist. His early theater career took him through the Northcote Theatre in Exeter, the Victoria Theatre in Stoke-on-Trent, and eventually the Royal Shakespeare Company, where he spent 2 years honing a craft that would later translate into one of British television's most dependable supporting performances. His first major screen role came in 1988, playing Will Brangwen opposite Imogen Stubbs in the BBC's adaptation of D.H. Lawrence's The Rainbow. Tarrant played Inspector Monroe for 12 years, appearing in well over 500 episodes of The Bill before leaving the show in 2002. Rather than fading from view, he kept working steadily afterwards, taking guest roles in Midsummer Murders, Doctors, and Casualty, and returning to the stage he'd always loved. In 2005, he took on the role of the legendary football manager Brian Clough in a touring production called Old Big Edie in the Spirit of a Man, a performance that toured venues across England to strong reviews and ran for several years in various forms. He later appeared in a Nottingham Playhouse production of Harold Pinter's The Caretaker, and in January 2010, he began touring in the stage version of Calendar Girls, a production that would ultimately become his final major role. Behind that disciplined, dependable public image, however, Tarrant was quietly carrying a weight that eventually became too much to bear. In the period before his death, he had been trying unsuccessfully to sell a property in London, a sale that fell through not once but twice, and the resulting financial pressure appears to have triggered a serious depressive episode. According to evidence given at the inquest into his death, Tarrant and his partner, Sabrina Morris, had visited their GP together about his declining mental state, and he had been prescribed sleeping tablets and antidepressants. Investigating officers described his behavior in the weeks beforehand as increasingly extreme, and Morris told the inquest she had been unable to reason with him or get him to accept the advice he was being given. On the 25th of January, 2012, Colin Tarrant was found at his home in Bristol, and he died of his injuries the following day. He was 59 years old. A coroner at Flaxbourton Coroner's Court later confirmed that his death was the result of suicide, brought on by depression that had been substantially worsened by his ongoing financial troubles, and that no other party was involved. Colleagues from the Bill were quick to pay tribute. Actor Jeff Stewart, who had worked alongside Tarrant for years as PC Reg Hollis, remembered him publicly as a lovely man and a greatly admired colleague, a sentiment echoed across the wider cast. Tarrant's death was a stark reminder that even the actors playing the steadiest, most reassuring characters on British television can be fighting battles no viewer would ever guess at. If you or someone you know is struggling with depression or thoughts of suicide, support is available, and reaching out to a trusted person, a doctor, or a crisis line can make a genuine difference. Tony Scannell billed DS Ted Roach into one of the most recognizable rule-benders in British television, a detective who got results the hard way and never much cared whether his superiors approved of his methods. Scannell, born Thomas Anthony Scannell in Kinsale, County Cork, in August 1945, grew up as the son of Tom Scannell, a goalkeeper who represented the Republic of Ireland in the 1950s. Rather than following his father into sport, Tony was drawn to performance, finding early work in theater and television, including a role in the 1980 science fiction adventure film Flash Gordon. Scannell joined the Bill in October 1984 in an episode titled A Friend in Need, originally signed for just 2 appearances. His performance as Ted Roach impressed producers enough that his 2-episode guest stint turned into a run lasting close to a decade, making him one of the defining faces of the show's earlier, grittier years, when Sun Hill's detectives felt closer to old-fashioned Fleet Street crime reporting than to modern procedural television. He remained with the show until 1993, and made a brief return for 2 further episodes in 2000. Away from the Bill, he also had a recurring role as Eddie Harris in the Channel 5 soap opera Family Affairs between 1997 and 1999, and continued to pick up television work, including appearances in Waking the Dead. In the years that followed, Scannell's path took him gradually away from the mainstream spotlight. He faced serious financial difficulty in the early 2000s and, rather than continuing to chase major television roles, chose to settle into a quieter, more private life with his partner, Agnes Lillis. Together, they became involved in community theater, and Scannell spent much of his later career teaching acting to adults in evening classes, clearly finding real satisfaction in passing on what he had learned rather than continuing to compete for screen time. Those who crossed paths with him in that later chapter of his life described someone who seemed genuinely content with the choice to step back from fame on his own terms, embracing a simpler, more grounded existence far from the pressures of a long-running television career. Tony Scannell died on the 26th of May, 2020, at the age of 74. His passing was confirmed to the press by his partner, and tributes flowed in from former colleagues who had worked alongside him decades earlier. Actress Katie Manning, best known for playing Jo Grant in Doctor Who, was among those who publicly remembered him as a wonderful actor. Scannell's Bill co-stars, several of whom had shared scenes with him during the show's early, formative years, spoke of a performer whose natural, instinctive style helped define what the Bill was capable of before it became the sprawling, decades-long institution it would eventually be. Ben Roberts carried real gravity as Chief Inspector Derek Conway, the senior officer whose insistence on doing things by the book made him both respected and, at times, resented by the younger characters serving under him. Roberts, born Bennett Roberts in Bangor, North Wales, in July 1950, attended Friars School before training at the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art in London, graduating in 1978. His early career involved a string of small television roles, including a part in the popular action series The Professionals, the medical drama Angels, and a guest appearance in Doctor Who in 1984, gradually building the kind of steady, dependable resume that eventually caught the attention of the Bill's casting team. Roberts joined the show in 1987 and played Derek Conway for over a decade, watching the character rise and fall through various ranks at Sun Hill before his eventual dramatic exit. Conway was killed off in the year 2000 when a petrol bomb was thrown into his patrol car, one of the show's more shocking storylines, and a reminder that even senior, seemingly untouchable characters were never entirely safe from Sun Hill's writers. Rather than retreating from the industry once his most famous role ended, Roberts' career actually expanded in the years that followed. He appeared in the 2011 adaptation of Jane Eyre, alongside Michael Fassbender and Mia Wasikowska, in Mike Leigh's acclaimed drama Another Year, in Alan Rickman's A Little Chaos in 2014, and in Tim Burton's fantasy film Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children in 2016. Proof that character actors built on decades of British television experience can absolutely find rewarding second acts in international film. Ben Roberts died on the 7th of June, 2021, at the age of 70. His death was confirmed by his former talent agency, which remembered him in a public statement as a wonderful actor with an extensive career across theater, television, and film, and extended condolences to his wife, the audiobook narrator and former continuity announcer Helen Lloyd. He was also survived by his son, Joseph, and his